Pode ser o Grupo Corpo ou a Companhia de Dança do Pantanal, Museu de Arte Moderna de São Paulo ou Arte em Cores, Filarmônica de Minas Gerais ou Programa Vale Música. Onde tem cultura, a Vale está. Dos projetos que todo mundo já conhece, até aqueles projetos que todo mundo precisa conhecer. É valorizando essa cultura que crescemos e evoluímos juntos.
Com o apoio do Instituto Cultural Vale, a arte popular é destaque no Maranhão.
E o nosso papel é fazer com que elas sejam conhecidas, valorizadas.
Vale, transformar a mineração hoje é transformar o amanhã de todos.
Ministério do Turismo e a Associação Casa Azul apresentam 20ª Flip Festa Literária Internacional de Paraty. O projeto conta com benefício da Lei Federal de Incentivo à Cultura. Vale Mais Cultura. Tem patrocínio oficial do Instituto Cultural Vale. Patrocínio Itaú. Copatrocínio O Globo. Apoio Esquilo, Macmóveis, Prefeitura de Paraty, Globo Livros, Unigel, CQSFV Advogados e Oceana. Concepção Associação Casa Azul. E realização Secretaria Especial da Cultura, Ministério do Turismo, Pátria Amada Brasil, Governo Federal.
Eu era criança, né, e tinha essa relação da Flipinha com as escolas, então eu lembro da gente se apresentando no palco da Flipinha, né, tinha uma música que a gente ensaiava, ou alguma poesia que a gente falava. E acho que toda criança também que passou por essa época tem, assim, a memória da Flipinha ali na praça, né, da arte na praça, da gente fazendo as oficinas, correndo pra lá e pra cá, os bonecos, enfim. São lembranças muito boas. E eu tinha feito uma oficina de fotografia pela Flipzona. E aí alguns dos alunos eles foram escolhidos para poder estagiar com o Walter Craveiro, que é o fotógrafo oficial da Flip. E eu fui uma dessas pessoas escolhidas e foi muito legal, assim. Foi aí que eu me apaixonei e me envolvi cada vez mais com a fotografia. Eu tinha 15 anos, né, e aí a gente ia fotografar na tenda dos autores, e a tenda enorme, assim, né, todo aquele impacto. E aí eu entrei com ele pela entrada de imprensa, assim, né? Então eu imagino, eu com 15 anos ali, com todos aqueles jornalistas, fotógrafos, com aquelas câmeras enormes. E aí eu entrando junto com eles, assim, eu lembro claramente desse momento. E aí a imprensa podia ficar só durante um período na tenda e depois eles tinham que sair. Mas como o Walter era o fotógrafo oficial, ele ficava até o final da mesa. E eu, como estava junto com ele, ficava ali junto com ele. Então os outros jornalistas saíam, a gente continuava lá, enfim. E aí no outro ano, como eles gostaram, eles me chamaram novamente para poder estar atuando junto com eles na parte de comunicação oficial da Flip, né, ali ajudando. Sempre que eu preciso me apresentar em algum lugar, até mesmo na minha mini biografia, porque às vezes a gente precisa, né, para alguns trabalhos, enfim, eu sempre coloco que eu iniciei minha formação na Flipinha e na Flipzona. Sim, eu sempre menciono isso em todos os momentos, porque foram através dessas experiências que eu tive na Flipzona, todos os contatos que eu tive, tudo que eu aprendi, que me fizeram escolher a profissão que eu tenho hoje. Hoje em dia eu sou formada em produção cultural pela Universidade Federal Fluminense, trabalho com comunicação, com fotografia, com audiovisual, e a Flip tem papel fundamental nisso, né? Principalmente a Flipzona, que foi esse laboratório, assim, né, de ter contato com vários jovens, e eu fico muito feliz também de ver outros jovens que, assim como eu, que passaram pela Flipzona durante tanto tempo, que também escolheram, né, estar ali na área de comunicação, no design, hoje estão formados, atuando na área. Hoje eu atuo na Casa da Cultura de Paraty, que é um dos principais equipamentos culturais aqui da cidade. Então, fico muito feliz também de ter voltado para a cidade, né, depois de ter me formado, e poder estar atuando profissionalmente aqui e trazendo toda essa bagagem que a Flipzona, né, me acrescentaram na minha formação, né, fizeram escolher o que eu faço hoje, né?
Flip 20 anos. Vidas que transformam lugares, que transformam pessoas. Escreva conosco essa história. Faça parte da rede amiga da Flip para continuarmos transformando juntos os próximos 20 anos. Acesse flip.org.br e faça sua doação.
Good morning, one and all. My name is Christiano. Northeast Gothic is my book. It's an honor and joy and great emotion to read a poem by Maria Firmina dos Reis. Although I'm from the state of Paraíba, most of my family are from Maranhão. I want to dedicate this reading to the memory of my grandfather and grandmother from Maranhão, where Maria Firmina was born. Let's get started before I start breaking down crying here. I don't want to love anyone else. I don't want to love anyone else. You want me to sing on the lyre my loves? Fine. My loves are dreams. I never loved anyone. I feared that loving on earth, love would do me some harm. I created in the heavens my loves. I loved my ideal love. Oh, you don't know how beautiful it is, the ideal of a woman. It's beautiful like archangels at the feet of the Supreme Being. It's beautiful and delightful. It chants and charms and seduces like from afar light shines in the dark sky. It speaks. The voice is grateful hymns to God, mysterious accents that rise pure to the skies. If I smile, they're eternal smiles of love, like an eternal dew kissing the flower. Why have loves on earth if I love my ideal? Loves that cause mourning. There are loves that do harm, and a bouquet of flowers, hearing from angels the harmonious voice and a sweet environment is breathed, and even sweeter is the languor. My chest expands, full of love, panting, and the celestial music re-begins at the sound of our love, a mystery. The moon is pure. The flower begins to acquire a scent. All the grass is flower. All the air is poetry. The pleasure comes from the heavens. Their love is a hymn of harmony. What does it matter that these are dreams, my loves? Fine. I want love's dreaming. I don't want to love anyone else. Long live Firmina, Maria Firmina dos Reis. A free translation of that poem. I am Fernanda Bastos, and together with Milena Brito and Pedro Meira Monteiro, we're the curators of FLIP 2022. And now it's a very beautiful time for us because we have, over the course of these days of FLIP, and we're on the last day, I can't even believe it, but we have talked about what can happen with the word and what writers can do, men and women, and these two writers who I'm going to call forward to the stage are figures who not only their work but their presence is very inspiring and have us want to always be close to them. They are figures who change our world and who bring literature as a place, an important place, not only for claiming rights, but also for us to look to the past and to people who allowed us to be here today. So I'm calling on the Ludmilla Lis, the chair, and with her Teresa Cárdenas and Cida Pedrosa. We can't hear, she's not using a microphone. We can't hear without the microphone. We have to sing in the microphone, otherwise people can't hear us. At home, of course, it's because I want to clap with the microphone tucked under my arm. I'll do. Leave it up to me. Leave it up to me. I don't let the rhythm drop. I don't want to show off. I can show off. I don't let the rhythm drop. Don't hesitate. I can show off. I just came here to perform what I learned. That's just a little bit. Just to warm up the morning with the spirit, this extra inter-Atlantic spirit that we have on this round table. It's a huge pleasure to be with you. It's a huge pleasure to be in this flip. Thank you to everyone who's attending us from outside and at home as well. Let's have a chat, okay? This isn't my microphone, okay? Okay. Good morning, one and all. I will begin by thanking the curators, these incredible curators, for the invitation. Fernanda Bastos, Melina Brito, and Pedro Meira Monteiro. It's always a pleasure to be at Flip. Welcome to the calm swaying of the graceful palm trees. I beg the permission of our honorary author. All of it is art. Everything is art. Plant Exu, as your Abdias de Nascimento asked here amongst us, your ashe is verbal ashe, bringing the spirit, saints, strength, and female voice, black, northeastern, to circulate amongst us in this literary festival. I call on you, invoke you, Maria Firmina dos Reis, my peer, my ancestor, to come to receive your long-awaited recognition and acknowledgement. Stay with us, Firmina. Come to us. Presenting my friends, my precious friends, introducing into an Afro-diasporan writing. I find a sister who came from the most beautiful island to the north of Brazil, who was born in Cárdenas. She's a writer, actress, dancer, social activist from Cuba, missing seeing herself and her sisters in books. She turned into words the stories that she dreamed, and creating a world where her sisters fit. She tells stories. She's a storyteller with the trauma about the old dog, which lives in my thoughts ever since I met her. She brought to us the simple stories of what we can call her letters to my mother in the clouds, and letters to my mother, published here by Palas Publishing House. Good morning, Christina. I applaud the award-winning Teresa Cárdenas. It was in Bodocó, in the hinterlands, in one of the most beautiful lands in Brazil, was where she was born. While I was being born in 1978, she had already gone to Recife to study literature, to negotiate justice for all. She went to study law, to say what she wanted, leaving us in love with her. She became a poet, to make reality have the taste of fantasy and fancy. She was a city councilwoman. Her mother was Lida. She sung her solo para vialejo, and she won a Jabuti Award for it. Now she's the red macaw who lives and relives free with the letters that feed and water our dreams, published recently by Companhia das Letras. Welcome, my sister from Pernambuco, from the hinterlands like my father and grandfather, Cida Pedrosa. Dear sisters, without further ado, you shine, please. We're coming back in a year of Flip with this possibility of us looking face to face, feeling each other's scent. Cida says she loves scents. We can hug each other. We were saying to Teresa, we hug, give 2 kisses, and smell, sniff each other. This importance of being together, to see, to hold, to hug. This is extremely important for us. How is this period of isolation, this period of pandemic for you? Was it creative? Was it destructive? Was it a little bit of both? How did you spend this time during the pandemic? Whoever would like to can go ahead and speak. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for the invitation and for the welcoming remarks. I'm speaking in a mixture of Portuguese and Spanish. It's a mixture of Portuguese and Spanish. And if you'd understand, please Say, I didn't understand you, Teresa. Okay, say, ta, okay. Okay, the time during the pandemic, it was very difficult, very tough, and with a lot of fear. We didn't know what was going to happen. It was very limiting and restrictive in Cuba. We could barely breathe. We suffered greatly. And even so, we didn't have as many deaths as other countries. Even so, the government fortunately took measures for us. It was somewhat late for us. We felt that they took the measures somewhat late. Nevertheless, they took the right measures. And okay, you know, the history of everybody has good vaccine coverage, vaccines. The immunization coverage is high in Cuba, and they were able to do today. We don't have any COVID. We have 1 or 2 cases per day maximum. And I needed to leave Cuba, not only my house, I left Cuba, not just leave Cuba but come back to Brazil. But I've always felt so much love and affection here because of my literature and myself. This is the way people receive me here because I am very happy here in Brazil. And I remember that I was telling Christina, my editor, my publisher, Christina, find anything. I want to come back to Brazil. Find something for me. And fortunately, Paraty, the flip, was able to have this magnificent idea, making us visible. For some of us, some people think it took too long, but it happened nevertheless. And here we are. And I want to thank as well people for this. It's a time of hope. It's a time that the good wishes return, and I think Brazil is going to work. Now things are going to go right. Now things are going to go right in Brazil. Beautiful. Good morning, one and all. It's a huge honor to be here. Thank you for the invitation. The pandemic for me caught me sidewise. I was a candidate for city council woman, and I had to hold my campaign in the middle of the pandemic. How to leave home and contact people. How were you able to do that? And it was in 2020 that I was elected city councilman. It was difficult to do this. I also got depressed like everybody, fearing people, and I lost dear friends. I have family members with autoimmune diseases who are very vulnerable to the virus, the SARS-CoV-2. So this was a huge impact. I'm the 15th child in a family with 15 children, and I'm 59 years old. Just imagine how old my siblings are. Just imagine the impact. Since I'm 59 and I'm the 15th of a family of 15, something comes to me in literature when I'm suffering an impact. So I decided to write a book of haikais based on what I was seeing in the middle of the pandemic. I wrote a book called Esthesia, which is the experience lived walking with my dog in the morning and in the evening, because Bob Marley is my dog's name. Bob Marley, my dog's name. And I left in the morning, and at night I began to see the city of Recife as a whole, a city which is completely deserted, but at the same time deserted from the wealthy and the middle class, because the poor people were still out on the streets, begging, lying under the bridges and overpasses. The animals in the streets were hungry as well, famished. So this experience at the same time seeing a flower blossoming better in the middle of the city, and the birds that came back, and the ants that made their anthill in the middle of the sidewalk with normally thousands of pedestrians would have walked there, and at the same time this pain to have seen black poor men and women delivering food in the delivery services for people who ordered delivery food. This experience, I expound this in esthesia, which means feeling. This is my experience with the pandemic, and unlike our dear beloved Teresa, we had, as everyone knows, a total abandonment by the president of Brazil, the outgoing president. Both of you are launching books, previously unpublished books here at Flip. Teresa in her short stories, and Cida in her poetry. Avon Baba and Red Macaws. That's my memory, of course. Both of these books have the desire to capture the daily life of the spoken word, the form, the oral shape that infiltrates and permeates dialogues. What is the importance of orality in your literary production, in your writing? Okay, I was born in the hinterlands, the Sertão, and literature came to me through the Trancoso and chapbooks and Emboladas, Repente, the different chapbooks. The man of the snake who saw everything, singing in verses and on the streets, and the oral poets. I can't separate my literature from the spoken word. When I write, I read out loud. Everything that I write, I read out loud. If it doesn't fit into my ear, if there's something that sounds out of tune, I cut that beautiful word out. I don't regret it at all, because the word has to fit in my ears just as it fits on the page. Has to fit in my ears and on the page. I was talking to Alice Santana yesterday. She said something that was, I'm going to remember forever. She said, the serenades, poetry recitals are pages, are blank pages you write. Many books, when you are writing the text orally, and it's democratic. So I come from this land of orality in the dry hinterlands, and when I write, I always think of sounds. That's like how it is with Red Macaws and Solo para Vialejo in metrics and sung metrics. It's a poem, but I can sing it just like the singers in my homeland. It's a poem, but I'm going to sing it, which says, this ancestral dream that consumes me has roots in the hinterlands and give me life to withstand struggles, marking the bard's name. In my name, a raw scar is the legacy I bring from my parents. It's the music that flows to my sighs on the viola. It resists the word, the space for clemency, and hammering the verses until one begs for more. People, I'm an African descendant myself. Africa in oral literature, stories, tales, songs, dances, it's all together. Everything is inside us. Just now, I here in Brazil, it's so beautiful to meet you, with you, and to all of my sisters, and it's the same feeling. It's the same thing inside, the same joy. Even when we weep, the same joy, the same strength, the same desire to continue struggling and to do everything, and everything for us as well, and for ours. And so for me, it was not very difficult. It was not very difficult to take these things into my literature. My literature is full of Africa. It's full of those things that emerged thousands of years ago. I have a poem which is here. It's one of these books that I'm introducing here at Flip, The Memory of Myself, which I describe myself. I describe myself in this, it's a bodily poem in this sense. I, Eve. I am black. God shaped my thick lips with his fingers, my hips and head. He looked in my eyes and placed there his light. I am the color of the first land of the world, the most fertile, the deepest. I was loved since the beginning. And in my womb, life was crowned. Here are my abundant breasts, my mouth full of songs and tales. I have constellations in my fingers. Africa was born from me. I'm Eva. I'm black. I am. People, something's going to happen here. We may collapse. It's all true. We're very true, right? Fernanda, Milena, Pedro. This possibility of living, I think that is what we together, at least we've been meeting since yesterday. I have known Teresa for some time. I had the opportunity to meet Cida just now, but it's like we've known each other for a long time. And ever since we met, this closeness, this communion has been easy. It's like it just flows. It's like we've known each other for years. The possibility of life for women, black women in the northeast of Brazil is an insult today. So when the curatorship of Flip invites a Cuban woman and two Brazilian, one from Pernambuco and one from Rio de Janeiro, with our ancestry from Pernambuco, because my grandfather and father were from Pernambuco. The curators are saying to us, and what we want to say today is that our life, it is worthy, very worthy, and it's powerful, but not just our lives. We have several other powerful lives. Ana Flavia here, Fernanda Miranda, who's been here yesterday. We had a beautiful roundtable in the evening with Lázaro, Alicia, and Midria, and the potential of women and their power. It's they who shape new worlds. The womb from Africa, the womb from the Northeast is what generates art. And art is life. For us, especially. So I would like for you, if you could, process a few words by you, Cida. I will never tire asking you to recite. Let's rock the auditorium. Give us a word that has to do with what you have in terms, at least what I felt in your literature. Cida pursues this. She said she pursues the rhythm, the word, what this word means, what's behind the word, what it means to say, what it means to transport and carry and bear. Cida, earth, and word sometimes are the same thing. If you've had access to writing, you'll realize this. Give us something that has your face, Cida. I know that you've already chosen it, so don't put on airs for us. I'm not going to put on airs. I'm going to say first an excerpt for Solo para Vialejos, a chapter of Old Dog, which since yesterday, Teresa and I are reading each other's literature, and I'd like to read from Red Macaws as well. Not now, but afterwards. You can do anything you want. Feel free. To be black, yes. I know the complexion of the sun and the flower of work. Lourdes, Geralda, Lourdes Wibbett, who wore slacks under their skirts. They harvested. Morning, afternoon, and night. Harvesting cotton, selling songs from the altar to scare away the fatigue in their toils. Black women. I gave them lunch at their workplace and saw them eating under the juazeiro tree, hearing the birds singing and the locusts. The water from their gourds was part of the ritual and their improvised rest, and reminded them of the presence of the sun and the distance from God. This is a chapter from Old Dog by Teresa Cárdenas. Now, almost with the death on his heels, but when he still had the strength, working, cutting sugarcane, weeding and filling the carts with firewood, feeding the ovens, and oiling the parts of the sugar mill every week, fixing the doors from the barracão, the warehouse. And before, when he was a young boy, he had been in charge of taking the firewood to the kitchen of the big house and to plant yams, carrots, banana, cleaning the pig pen, taking the horses down to the river to wash them and to fix the carts, and the pigs, removing the mud from the boots of the slave master. And with 3 palms of height, he fed the chickens, guided the mules, the sugar cane bagasse, weeded the cornfields, cleaned the big house, wove the raw leather for the whips. And when the sun rose, Old Dog, he thought he was, and he already worked ever since his mother's womb. He was already a slave since his mother's womb. Teresa, give us a few of your words as a present and a gift. I'm betraying Flip here with this book, Abombaba. Awombaba means ancestors. Awombaba in Yoruba. Awombaba. The Cuban people are heirs of the Yoruba, of the Bantus also. And I wanted to pay tribute to the ancestors from the title itself of this book, Awombaba. It's a book consisting of 12 tales, which I call biographical tales, because Cida, you may agree with me that writing is an act, a political act, but also a spiritual act. So sometimes we are writing and we don't know where the stories come from. These tales come from afar, and they come seeking translators. They're looking for bears of bridges to reach here. And we are used by them, and we are strengthened through them. So one of these tales is from Awam Baba, where I say who were the ancestors, the Cubans, and how this nation emerged, Cuba. Awam Baba. I apologize because the work in reading this task, reading in Portuguese, I don't read very well in Portuguese, so I apologize. Oh, I hope you understand. Nevertheless, Awam Baba, the great-grandfather of the sugarcane mill owner, left Salamanca. He was fleeing. He was a criminal, a pimp, a murderer. To earn his fortune, he took the ship Esperança, and with the license of the Catholic king, he negotiated traffic slaves to the Spanish colonies in the Americas. During his long years as a slave merchant, he took 18,000 slaves to the Americas. He finally settled in Cuba. He had 30 sugar mill and sugar plantations and had more than 4,000 slaves. He died in peace, leaving a considerable fortune to his two sons with Dona Rosa, his wife. The sons that he had with the black women, Maria do Rosário, Manuela, Nicolasa, and Caridade da Cruz, he never acknowledged his paternity or conceded their freedom. When he died, the old patriarch and his widow sold two of the bastards to the neighbor landowner. Others were quartered for attempting to escape into the woods. He delivered one of the girls he delivered to one of the brothels in the port. The great-grandfathers of the blacks, the Awam Baba, the ancestors of the slaves, were hunted in Angola, Cameroon, Nigeria, Guinea, Benin. They descended from kings and princes of the old powerful kingdoms of Western Africa at the time that they were kidnapped and ripped out of their villages to become slaves. Many of them were artists, teachers, hunters, farmers, carpenters and goldsmiths, and blacksmiths. They were taken to the New World, naked, shackled like animals, chained. They withstood the beatings and thrashing, martyrized, raped, sold, separated, murdered. And they had no goods or money to leave to their descendants. But at any rate, they gave what was indispensable to survive the horror: tales and songs, music, dance, their gods and foods, the strength of their spirit, and the memory of who they were. These are the roots of identity, national identity in Cuba. Spain, the colonizers, fierce assassins, and the Africans who came from West Africa. They were brought like this violent way, this horrible way, and they survived however they could. And even so, they robbed their names, they robbed their religions, they robbed everything of them, but they couldn't rob what they had inside their souls, which were those they gave us. We are the descendants of survivors, descendants of people who resisted everything. And now we're here thanks to their resistance and what they passed down to us. The thinker from Cameroon, Ash Membe, he has several books, and in the critique of black reasoning, he talks about this, and he has an article which is in Spanish. I'll remember the title of the article in a few minutes, but what he means is that us and our ancestors, we underwent a process of kidnapping when we were kidnapped in Africa and taken away from Africa. And he does an allegory with a fire, as if it had undergone a time of a forest fire. In the fire, just imagine you in your homes, you leave, you can pick up don't have time to pick up any belongings at all. You have to flee immediately. And his idea was that black people undergo, and they started living with what was not left from the fire, after the fire, which was not possible to pick up from the fire, and which we're not able to pick up. I recently wrote an article called Black Soot. I take from this idea of Ashley's idea of a fire, where the black art and black history, which permeates our lives, is the soot from this fire, which is left over from the fire, and which comes by traces and vestiges and sayings. Edouard Glissant, Conceição Evaristo, people who study the traces or vestiges, the vestiges and traces of this culture, African culture, from goldsmiths, artists, musicians, princes, kings, and princesses who were enslaved. This culture is what unites us and what allows us to look at each other and not say anything, and suddenly our eyes are full of tears. I look at Anna here, I'm looking at her now, and we understand each other without having to say much, right, Anna? We understand each other, right, Cida? And that's the possibility of the invisible that black people create. We work with the invisible. We work with, you can't see here now, because it was what kept us alive to this day. In your literature, both of you, there's a very strong aesthetic concern. Cida perhaps also on the visual issue, which we have here. The story, the concrete poem, which I don't know if that's how she likes to talk about her poems, but the poem with images, the imaginary and the rhythm, it's extremely important in her, the Pedrosa's poetry. With Teresa, I observed this issue of orality that we brought here already. Tell us, whenever you wish, what from literature, your literature, captures back these traces, these vestiges. Great. Do you want to begin, Teresa? I feel challenged with each book. Whenever I learn a format, I want to experience other formats. As a teenager, I wrote 3-line poems, and I called them haikai, and I discovered they were Brazilian haikai. Haikai itself has 17 poetic syllables, and I exercised aesthesia, the concreteness of haikai with 17 syllables. My first book has some very short poems, which I do a counterpoint to my roots, because young people want to break with their past, with their ancestrality, because you're a rebel. Afterwards, sometimes some people find themselves again. I found myself again in my first book. I wrote like this, for example, when I was 17 years old, an epitaph. Here lies Maria on red days, gave everyone her blue smile. It's not a good poem, but it's a 17-year-old poem. And I'm taking this poem to say that each book I test things, experiment with different things, but always with a sound, an image, and sound, and solo, I explode everything that I did, and in the macaws I perfect this, because in solo there's no metric, but macaws has metric, so I'm very interested in breaking with any concept that, if doing interlanguages, I combine prose with metrics, with concrete conversation, imagetic conversation. I like to make breaks. I've always liked breaks, and I can answer better by reading, because that's where I think that the work speaks for itself more than I even deserve. Red Macaws is about the Araguaia guerrilla war, this horror that needs to be, that has been left in the shadows so long. Chico Jassis is here, a man who was a political prisoner for almost 10 years. 10 years he was a political prisoner. My brother, he was arrested at 25, 26 years of age and was in prison for 10 years. So Red Macaws talks about this, and I will introduce here. It's a journey. I introduce the Amazon and the people. I'm going to read an excerpt of where I introduce the people. The people that lived there were stuck to dreams in the hurt of those who don't have a bit of land, who die in the sad day with no rain or salt. And other people that lived there came looking for the little, since the little was what was missing for them. They came looking for grand, from looking without a veil. Too little land for life, too little life for the future, coming from the dawn, the table with the sun shining, and the moonshine coming for the table with God and his apostles, and the last vision, a saintly, holy table, and sweat, unjustifiable sweat. The other people who lived there came in search of stones, stones born from the water, stones coming from the earth, stones, 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 gemstones, a possibility for pardon, the possible basis for the future. Other people who lived there only knew the pebbles, and where the cactuses sprouted, and where the flowers dared to shine, and as fireflies, blue, green, pink, brown, black, stones seen in dreams and not even seen in magazines, since color just the sun in the afternoon, in the dusk. The people covered the shine of metal, crucifixes and altars of churches, metal on the necks never touched, and fingers that are that caresses, caresses, and expelled and never touched. The other people who lived there switched the prison for the sun in the green dungeon. The people that lived there came in search of skin, the skin, the hides, and delivered to as merchandise. The people who lived there ate game and bartering for basics. The red macaws reached there to be part and mixing with each other, cultivating the fields, hunting for food, for fish, putting fish on the table, to harvest nuts and watch the sunset. There were few, but they felt pregnant with everything and capable of fertilizing the ground and planting scripts, scores, poems, many of them still beardless, barely graduated and leaving school, others already put to the test, already put to pain, already put to prison. What a task I have for me. Teresa, I read, some people have already said they give me the same feedback I read in one swoop, Old Dog, at one sitting. You can't stop reading Old Dog. You're desperate with the prospect, and I think that this is one of the things, the most interesting things of literature. Afro-diasporan literature. It's to bring this life, which was destroyed, to recover the integrity of the Afro-diasporan people, because even though you tell the story of an enslaved person, it is permeated by the point of view of the enslaved person. I think that this is the touch that comes from Afro-diasporan literature. I'm going to read a short excerpt. Just a brief note. This is a concern that I always had, because when I was a girl, in addition to moving black and not seeing black characters for young people, in the television, neither were you able to see anybody black on TV. When there were soap operas, for example, like with slavery, they were always those characters in the background. Yes, mistress, that's all they said. Yes, sir. The main plot was always love between the young white girl and the young white gentleman. And it was very complicated because I couldn't understand in the books and reading history. I was able to read that enslaved persons in Cuba were never passive. And there was a dichotomy that I found there, which did not reflect reality. So I wanted to write something talking about the individuality of these people, like they were who they were, what they thought, their rebellions and fears, because Old Dog is a character. He's an anti-hero, but he is very brave and valiant as well. Sometimes I feel that he is a 70-year-old man who had lived his entire life in slavery, and there is a part, it's what he knows, and it's a part where he puts his hand on his chest and he feels that he doesn't have a heart. It's a stone. It's like putting a sand on a stone, because there's no life. There's no life. But his heart lied to him. And this is humanity. That's hope. And that is resistance. And that is his desire to survive no matter what. And this comes like Isa, the girl. And Isa discovers suddenly, she discovers that there was love in that. And he discovers that although he was afraid, he was capable of doing great, brave acts for those who he loved without realizing it. This is beautiful in your literature. And another thing which I work with as well, it's the concept of the name. Remember that the Africans lost their names, and I always bring the name back to them in my books. In the case of Old Dog, the slave master said Old Dog, not his name, because nobody remembered his name. He called him Old Dog, and he called him Old Dog because they reminded of the dogs when they felt the scent of those who fled into the mountains in the forest. When he ends the book, I'm not going to tell too much because I want everybody to buy the book and for everybody to have the book, because I have to buy it, because It's a unique experience. I have read it. It's like a volcano. You have to buy it. And at the end, if you can, you have to buy it. The name comes back to him. We are witnesses to this, but we don't participate in this dream. It's a dream that's kept. It's his treasure. It's his wealth. It's his identity. And it's just for him, not for us. We are not there. We can see his mother's lips. And they speak to him. It's very curious. I didn't know that. I read a lot, but I wasn't aware of this. That when the Africans, especially the Yoruba people, give the name to the newborns, they only know the name 7 or 8 days after they're born. And to say the name, and this name is whispered in their ear of the newborn. Only the owner of the name hears the name. It's a magic word, right? But it's very interesting because it reaches literature, it reaches us. That's why it is something spiritual, something from memory, and my identity, my African identity. I apologize because my task as the chair here is somewhat difficult. They gave me a message to ask if we have any questions, but I think we don't have any time for any questions, and I've already finished with all the questions. I got it all wrong here. Afterwards, I would like to announce to you that our authors are going to be autographing in the bookshop across in the Teresa bookshop. Feel free to take your books or buy the books and have them sign the books. I would also like to ask, I was going to ask Teresa to read this fragment that I took from the book. Would you like to read it, or can I read it myself? Can I? The book is Old Dog. There's a moment in which the enslaved persons are waiting to receive the clothing from that year. That they spend an entire year with the same clothing. Supplying clothes. The slave driver rang the bell. The morning sun was mild, and the breeze, the sickly smell from the sugarcane mill, the slave drivers gave the women rough cloth with large pockets with colorful handkerchiefs. The men weaved rough knit clothing. The boys and girls also had the right to clothing and sandals. When the distribution ended, Old Dog continued right there under the hot sun. With his hands empty in his pockets of his burlap jeans, his head crestfallen, said, "I apologize, master, but I haven't received my clothes." The man touched the tip of his boot with his whip and looked at the old man, the pale, skinny old man. "What I had to distribute has already been distributed. Get lost and don't bother me anymore," the slave driver said, and turning his back to the old man. "I thought that this year perhaps there might be a piece of burlap." The old man tried, but he was whipped, and he realized that what had happened when the blood was already dripping down his face, and he wasn't able to move at all because he had fallen on the ground. With the boot of the slave driver pressing his neck and chest. To wrap up here, there are times when at least I still feel certain boots on my chest. As a black woman in Brazil, there's always a slave driver who would like to stomp on our chests with their boot and keep us from breathing or speaking. As a Cuban woman, Teresa, your experience, it is at some moment different from ours, but similar on several different points. Would you like to share this experience here this morning with us for a bit? First of all, to remind us that Brazil and Cuba were the last countries to free the enslaved. So this process of leaving this horrible thing, but racism also came. It's still a struggle with racism in Cuba. In Brazil, I know, but in Cuba also. And it's very difficult and it's very painful that 30 years after, we still have 130 years later, we're still suffering the consequences of slavery. I have for 5 months, I have a little granddaughter, and my granddaughter, when my daughter comes on the street, people ask her if it's her daughter. It was the same thing that happened with me. And it's incredible that at this stage, so to speak, these things still happen. In Brazil more, in Cuba, where we have a revolutionary process of egalitarianism, equality amongst all, where the social process have been so important in these 63 years since the revolution. But there's still a long struggle ahead. We're still very separated in Cuba because it has been a policy by the government to struggle against these things. But sometimes I feel that they don't let the black people be enough. From their point of view, they don't see the need that the black people stand out from the others. Yesterday I was talking about this, and I said that this reminded that fear, the white fear or fright against blacks. There's always a concern that the blacks will join together and what might happen. And it's difficult. It's difficult in this time in 2022 to be talking about things that we have still not been able to win in Cuba. And they are boots on our chests. They are things that we still have to struggle for. But if you remember in Old Dog, in the following excerpt, what happened? You have to read it, right? But it happened that from his people, where he was, and they picked him up. This also happens in Cuba, even when we have these boots of the slave driver. This idea that we don't have to unite. We unite nevertheless, and we unite with Brazil, and we unite with Colombia, and we unite with Costa Rica, and we unite with Puerto Rico, and we unite with all of the Latin American countries who have African descendant peoples. It's a very tough struggle, a difficult struggle, but we cannot tire or waver. It's a struggle of resistance. And both in the literature and in music and in African aesthetic, even in Brazil, in Cuba rather, there is a struggle or a campaign, which it's a struggle as well, a campaign and a struggle for African aesthetic. And I remembered that with my daughter, they said me, and I went out with her hair and said, why is she uncombed on the street? Anybody felt the right to say, why is she uncombed? Give her braids. And yeah, that happened. But now it's a conquest that we have, our clothing and showing our identity in our hair, in our faces, in our clothing, in our music, in literature. It's a strong movement. We don't have a well-defined African descendant movement like we have in Brazil, but we are ready for the struggle, and we're going to wage this struggle, like not for us already, for the ones who came before us. That's it. Teresa, I'm going to continue a little bit with you still. I'm hiding from the fact that our time is up. Can we see the video? Okay, people, show the video for us like this. This is an initiative. It's an initiative which from people, different hip-hop groups convened in Cuba, but I like literature, but I like music, and they called on me, and we did this. This is the story behind this video. It's exactly a group of black Cubans who went to a place to eat, and they said, no, you can't eat here. That's why it's called the right to food. You can't eat now because it's for foreigners, which are the new conquerors, like conquistadores, because the need that the country has for foreign exchange because of the embargo and the economic difficulties, but you cannot do this to the detriment of the Cuban population, much less to the detriment of the black people. It's a response to this fact. So let's see this. I think the video speaks for itself, and we'll wrap up afterwards. My round lips.
Y mi nariz, agitada planicie bajo la noche duplicada de mis ojos. Ya no quiero más fuegos ni máscaras sobre este rostro negro maltratado por los siglos. Voy de vuelta al reino ancestral de las lanzas. Mi cabeza se alza con un grito por sobre los huesos de mis muertos. Voy de vuelta a la que fui, a la que no conozco, a la que casi olvido. Voy principescamente, como a lomo de elefante hacia mi negritud.
Mira, no nos dejaron entrar en aquel lugar. No es primera vez que pasa, lo tenemos que aclarar.
Es lo que hay. Le llaman derecho de admisión, sí, donde caben tantas formas de discriminación que
es obsesión.
Yo me río. Tienes que oír las justificaciones, Dios mío.
Yo no sé, tendremos cara de comer mierda o qué. Cuando dicen, hey, discúlpeme, pero eso allá adentro está lleno. Digo, bueno, me asomo y veo que no.
¿Qué es esto? ¿Ya están así?
A la cara.
El portero chato nos mira como diciendo.
Si yo hablara, nada más cuido la entrada. Estos son los frijoles de mi familia, no quiero guardar.
El titingo que allí formamos no lo vamos a describir, porque hoy solo queremos fluir.
Mano para arriba.
Al final vino el gerente.
No me oyeron.
A ver, diga.
En esas mesas reservaron extranjeros.
Después, bueno, ya veremos.
Pintan los calabozos de nuestro color. Las plazas laborales de sueldo menor, región de arrabales y hogar a media construcción. Los daños y males provocados con toda intención tienen nuestro color, la tiza que diría borrarlo. Esos momentos tristes que pasaron le llamamos negros, ¿no? Si el universo fuese un cuerpo humano, nos dejarían vivir, claro que sí, pero en el ano. Abandona la almohada, hermano. Ese racismo norteamericano es más agresivo que el nuestro. No es menos cierto, el de aquí vive enmascarado como Guerra Fría. Siempre está, aunque a veces no lo siente.
Tapar el sol con un dedo osa y es lastimosa la hipocresía que un de día siempre se posa sobre cabellos de forma esponjosa que habitan sobre hombros del color de la más notable mariposa. A los que también temen, que gozan, y aún así casi todos practican aquí la regla de Ocha del Congo. Y mi única duda al respecto es esas acciones cosas del respeto de sus ancestros. Detesto que entendido lo dispuesto, tu gesto siga el compacto, el contexto opuesto. Queda mi discurso puesto, que el 340 se encarga del resto.
Con el pretexto de no resquebrajar la unidad de la nación, apuesto cheque de aceptación al pueblo negro, que asume a ciegas una historia que nos niega y un presente herencia de esta visión.
Analicemos bien esta situación, si se
si la talla se complica, si robaron en la casa o si la sangre se aplica. Pero en las olimpiadas la bandera entre las manos, con oro, plata y bronce, toditos somos cubanos. Hermano, propaganda en televisión, ya no hay only way people, ahora hay derecho de admisión. En cartel es otro, pero sí es lo mismo, eso se llama atienda, evolución del racismo.
It's hip-hop, rap, a few things you might not have been able to understand, but it's a song that from ancestrality to the present day, all the way, and the struggle that the people have, black Cuban people, African Cubans, to be and to not be invisible, to be present, to demand respect. Whenever I see this, I get choked up, and tears in my eyes, because it's difficult. They speak of the prison population in Cuba is almost all black, with the fewest opportunities, just like here in Brazil. The people with the fewest opportunities, and all these things, and sometimes they don't let us be happy, but together we can, and together it's going to work, I know. I'm truly moved, and I feel very close. I am extremely thankful to you all for welcoming me and bringing me here, not only with my literature, but my country as well. Cida would like to say a few last words. I studied jazz and blues. When blacks who performed jazz and blues sang, they sang to white audiences because black people were not allowed to enter those halls where they sang. Some of them said, and these were persecuted because of that by their peers, and I'm going to sing because this music has to spread across the world. I think that Flip in this edition got everything right with the curators and the participation here on the stage. But there is a kind of prohibition, which not the ban at the entrance, but it's the ban which the lack of opportunities in education, in work, in reading and building text means that in this audience, we more than 80% of us are white. So we need to fight for us, not only here on the stage, to be representing Brazil and the diverse Brazils, but for here and our fellowship, we have the same opportunity and diversity. So long live literature. Hope has come back to Brazil. Reminding you again that the authors are going to be signing their books over at the Teresa bookshop. Good afternoon and have a great day.